All right, everybody, we are here again at Kingsway at 2 o'clock in the morning, or whatever it is, 3 o'clock in the morning. We have been trying to get started, and apparently the industrial revolution is going on outside. Like we're like positioned kind of by this overpass, and they were like doing some kind of construction for the last like 2 hours on the bridge, and the audio is like all screwed up. So we have just been eating food and ordering knives and having fun. So we're going to get started now, hopefully, and see how it goes. So we're going to be looking at, obviously, scrimmage wrestling today. This is the last part of the scrimmage wrestling series that involves offense. So we've done all the pieces of offensive. We've done upper body takedowns, lower body takedowns, or initial grip fighting, securing the score. Now we're going to go into submission wrestling or submission offense, and then we'll go into everything we did: upper body takedowns, lower body takedowns, denying the score. Everyone's been asking for denying the score, like how to not get score on when you actually go down. So that's like a pretty hot topic, which I kind of didn't really expect people would be that excited about it, but everyone's like been asking me for it. So we'll go into the defensive portion after we finish this offensive stuff. Now this last section here is kind of coming full circle as far as offense goes, and it is looking at the integration of submissions into the scrimmage wrestling system. Okay, so it's not just like, hey, here's how to use the positions to not get scored on. Here's how to wrestle positionally under ADCC rules. Now it's the interface of we're also throwing a submission threat in there so that we can use, and I'll talk about this a little bit more. I will use submissions against guys who wrestle well and don't really know the submission game, and I will use more positional wrestling against jiu-jitsu guys who don't really wrestle that well. So some kind of tactics, as well as techniques we can talk about as we progress into this. But we're going to look at kind of wrapping everything up as far as offense, bringing everything full circle, and then looking at the interplay between our positional wrestling, which we've looked at before, but also now throwing offense in there, whether my partner is attacking me, or whether I'm attacking him. So whether he snaps me down, if he gets me to a front headlock, or I snap him down, I get him into a front headlock, whether I have a rear body lock on him or he has a rear body lock on me, we're going in, getting into attacking cycles, whether it be in the upper body or the lower body, and then finishing our partner or using it to win the scrimmage and end up in top position. Obviously, we're on the back. So let's get into it. All right. So what we're going to look at now is just some, like, we're going to go over obviously the theory and the overview and everything, like, before we get into actual technique. But just talking about a little bit deeper as far as looking at the interface between submissions and this positional work. So a lot of times we'll start with going for either a position. You know, my partner will shoot on me, I'll sprawl, and I'll feel like I'm losing takedown battle, and I'll transition into a submission to either finish a submission or use to my advantage to either get on top of my partner, take my partner's back, stand back up, or threaten a submission, and use the threat of the submission to get her fighting that, and go back into my submissional work and go back into a sprawl or a heist or whatever the case is. A lot of times we'll start off with a submission, where she goes in, she shoots, I go for a submission, and I use that to go into a sweep as soon as we hit the floor, or I use that to try to start attacking a guillotine to my partner. She starts posting her hand, trying to 4-point out, or fighting my hands, then I use that to start heisting up, and I use the threat of a legitimate submission to go from submission into a positional play. So there's a lot of different ways that we can take this. We can either start with the submission and then go into and continue with the submission. We can start with the submission. We can go from submission into positional play. We can start with the positional play and stay positional, or start with the positional play and then go into submissions. And then you can kind of go back and forth between the two, where I go positional play, submission, positional play, submission, 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 positional play. And we can kind of play between these attacks on submissions to keep my partner honest, where if they don't react, we can get a submission. If I go for a guillotine and she does nothing, I'm going to strangle her. So she has to respect the guillotine, and as she respects the guillotine, now her hands are here versus grabbing my legs, grabbing my hips, and as she goes to defend, I can start heisting up and playing a game which allows me to convert back to a positional play. So let's say she hits a double leg, and she puts me down in a situation like this. If I'm just trying to heist from here and she's just worried about the positional play, and now she's on my hips, or she's moving to a body lock, whatever the case is. But if I legitimately put in a submission threat, let's say I have a high risk from here, I legitimately put in a submission threat, she realizes if she drives towards me now, she's going to get finished. So what she has to do is she has to start backing away and trying to pull her elbow back and start fighting on my hands from here. And now she's off my legs. So as she goes and starts attacking my hands defensively, as she's doing that, now we can go right back in. We can get up. And we can start playing a positional play. And now we can go from submissions into positions. And we can kind of chain these submissions in with all the wrestling that we've already done through these scrimmage wrestling instructionals, and make it a lot easier for us to score on our partner and then integrate these submissions into the positional play. So just as far as like a little bit of theory goes there, you're going to see a lot of integration and interface between just a straight up positional game, which is wrestling under ADCC rules, with our normal classical jiu-jitsu game, which is slightly modified because we're doing it from the feet to the floor versus just down on the floor. Also, apparently I forgot to introduce Sunny and BJJ Fanatics and Ty. And Sunny's got socks on for some reason. She's got mismatched clothes. She's got like makeup all over her shirt. She's a disaster to it.
It's 3 a.m. and I'm tired. And I thought you were going to roll through and actually finish.
She's got banana cream nails. Yeah, I like heisted off. I like heisted from the guillotine. I like heisted, and she just like.
I thought you were going to roll through. You just rusty, okay?
What, you rusty?
You're rusty. Anyways.
Rusty runner.
Yeah, I'm a runner now, guys.
Why do you have socks on, Sunny?
My toes are too valuable for this. Can't.
Told her we're going to lose sales.
Enough of this. Let's go. It's 3 a.m, guys. Come on, guys. Let's go.
So this instructional is obviously focused on submission offense, like how we can attack submissions, and then we're going to have like a whole thing where we're just focused on defending submissions. Like my partner goes for a Kimura, and I like defense, like cartwheel over it, or I'm like clearing submissions as we go down to win the scrimmage and be out of harm's way. Now, submission offense, this is going to partly overlap with denying the score. So, if my partner takes me down, obviously I don't have a clock running if I have a submission locked. But there's going to be like some submissions, like a guillotine into a hip heist into a positional play. And we're going to touch a little bit on that today, like how to go from, like how to scrimmage with submissions on the floor. If my partner hits a takedown, for example. But we're not going to touch totally on like using a guillotine to like switch heists from side to side and like go into like a full on like integration of denying the score with submissions. We're going to touch on that a lot later and a lot more in depth in scrimmaging denying the score. But we will touch on it a little bit. So like, I'm not going to go into like, my partner puts me down. My partner puts me down with a guillotine in situations like this. And then I try to go for the guillotine. She runs across into side control. And then I go in here and I start heisting up and I start playing games like this. And then we go, she starts moving to my back. And as she starts moving to my back, then I go into either a Yoko Sumigashi or I go right into a Granby. These are all you're getting into more of a scrimmaging down on the ground than you are just submissions. So we'll touch on that a little bit, but most of it is going to be in denying the score. We're going to be focused mostly on hitting the submissions and how to follow people from the standing position into the ground position. And then for guillotines, what is the hierarchy of the guillotines that we're going to use to fall with a securely locked guillotine where my partner can't just immediately elbow pass out and clear as I'm falling. So it's more about how to follow someone, the order of operations, and what to attack when on the feet, and then how to follow people down, keeping a connection so that you don't land. I don't go for a guillotine and end up underneath them without anything. And now I'm just using a ton of energy to start the scrimmage. So we're going to touch a little bit on how to deny the score and how to operate from the ground, but it's mostly about picking a series, picking sequences from the feet on how to attack submissions and why I would attack one submission versus another. And then securely following someone down and transitioning into a finish on the floor rather than using it to scrimmage on the ground, if that makes sense. All right, so obviously,
tonight's not tonight.
we touch on it in every instructional. But the scoring criteria, the rules, the stance, everything's much different. Now, when we're talking about submissions, obviously submissions change the entire game because it's not like, some of them are applicable in wrestling and some of them aren't. There's no submissions at all in wrestling. So the submission a game is going to change the game so much where sometimes, I'm baiting a leg. Sometimes I want the guy to do this. Sometimes I'll give the guy a little bit to take a submission. So the wrestling game or the submission game completely changes the entire scrimmage because of the fact that it is just a part of the sport that is not involved at all in wrestling. And so everything is going to be a lot different already, like the time limits, the stances, the rules, the scoring criteria, and then, of course, the fact that there are now submissions involved. And, that is going to give specifically wrestlers, okay, this is the portion where when you start to integrate high-level submissions into scrimmage wrestling, usually the people who are going to give you most issues in scrimmage wrestling are high-level wrestlers because it is more predominantly wrestling than it is jiu-jitsu. But when you start to integrate high-level submissions into the scrimmage, this instructional is what's going to screw up wrestlers the most because of the fact that they're just not used to this at all. At least the positional part of scrimmaging, wrestlers are kind of used to. Obviously, we're giving different reactions. Like you can briefly sit to half guard and then or Granby and expose your back and not get scored on. Or if they're going to gut wrench you, you can just go with the gut and then just as they stop, you can start your scrimmage because there's no points for getting turned. So they can adjust pretty easy, but the submissions is just going to completely screw them up. So our focus is going to be, next is going to be, how can we start to integrate submissions and wrestling into tactics and use submissions against certain players and more positional wrestling against other players. And then we're going to kind of look at the interface between these two. So these are just general rules, but in general, if I'm going against a super high level jiu-jitsu guy, I know that he is going to be better at jiu-jitsu movements and moves than he is wrestling moves in general. If I'm going against a super high level wrestler, I know that he's going to be better and more used to classical wrestling moves than he is jiu-jitsu moves and submissions. So in general, if I am fighting a high level jiu-jitsu guy, I will out wrestle him. If I'm playing my A game and using the path of least resistance, I'll play my A game. And if I'm fighting a jiu-jitsu guy, I'll use scrimmaging and just hand fight him, snap him down, foot sweep him, and just end up in top position and play a game against him from top position. So I know that I can comfortably out wrestle him and out scrimmage him and get into top position. Whereas if I'm going against a super good wrestler, it's probably just easier for me to pull guard and then leg lock him or invert underneath him and take his back and sweep him, or use some kind of ashigarami entrance to go in and start heisting and then wrestling up from there and working into attacks from bottom position. Instead of going from standing to ground, I can go from ground into standing where I have a connection. I can get to a position of advantage, and then I can go in and put him down or integrate back and fall back into a submission attacks from an attempted wrestle up. So in general, I will use wrestling techniques and more wrestling heavy moves and tactics against jiu-jitsu guys, and I will use more submissions and kind of interesting and quirky jiu-jitsu movements against wrestlers who aren't really expecting me to just fall down into leg locks. And this is a perfect example of this is I think it was David Ramos fighting Pat Downey at the trials in the quarterfinals. They're wrestling. They may have even been in overtime, so I'm not sure if maybe David wasn't allowed to pull guard. But he goes in, he picks up a single leg. Pat Downey, normal wrestling defense, puts a whizzer on, puts his leg outside, takes it to the outside position, making it harder for him to run the pipe. But then he just pulls ashigarami and heel hooks him. So using these submissions that wrestlers aren't used to is a pretty easy and surefire way to screw these guys up. The best guys are going to be guys who are super high level in wrestling and also super high level in jiu-jitsu, and that's what you get from scrimmage wrestling. But if I'm using, like if I'm playing a game, for example, against a jiu-jitsu guy, and he goes to like shoot like a let's say he goes to like shoot a head inside double leg from here. I'm just going to go and I'm going to start playing this game where now I'm going to start sprawling, turning towards the head, and then trying to put his hands on the floor, ending up in a front headlock, and then getting into top position. Right, so I know that like most jiu-jitsu guys, when they go to hit my hips, I'm just checking the hips, and there's just no way they're gonna just run through me and put me down. So if I'm fighting a jiu-jitsu guy and she starts shooting on me from here, like we're just here, and then we're gonna be like just playing like a more positional game and going into classical wrestling. Or if I'm going against a good wrestler, like most of the guys, if I'm competing against like a super high level guy who's my size, a lot of times their feinting is so good and they're so good at hitting that initial connection, like before, and obviously putting my butt to the floor doesn't mean anything, so the takedown itself doesn't matter. But a lot of times you're going with like Olympic level guys, world champions in wrestling. I'm not talking about like D1 guys, I'm talking about like legitimate like Olympic level guys. Hit your hips, and like before you even know it, the second they make contact, you're like, I'm going down. And so I won't even fight it because, then if I'm like fully engaged into a sprawl from here, now I go in, I'm trying to sprawl, then he like moves up to my body base, he like locks the body lock, he steps inside, and then he's like body lock, locks body lock, steps inside, and now there's like very minimal attacks that I can have from here. There's like not really too many submissions I can do, and like he's most of the time he either like knock me, drag me underneath him into side control, or like go in and start taking my back from here. So a lot of times what I'll do, if I know I'm going with a super good guy, and I know he's going to put me down, the second he hits my hips and starts like double, the second he hits my hips, I'll just, okay, no problem. We're going to go in. I'm going to go down from here, no problem. And as he goes to put me down, I know I'm going to go down, but I get something with it. So as we go down, I can go in. I can start playing a game where I can start threatening guillotines. I can start going in, blocking dorses from here. We can go into all of our follow-up attacks where now I can use the initial threat of submission to start going in and getting up to top position. This is a big, like, you see it more so in training. But like guys in training basically essentially never shoot head outside shots on me because they just get guillotined every single time. Like the second anyone goes to shoot a head outside shot on me, like they're just immediately coming into high risk territory. And so whenever I see I'm dealing with in general, I'm dealing with a super good wrestler, I will just concede, okay, no problem. Hit my legs, put me down, there's going to be no score, and I'll attack submissions down on the ground. And then worst case scenario, if I lose the submission, then I can just turtle if I have to, or I can just scrimmage back up to my feet, and we're back in neutral. And now I know that if I got close to a guillotine, she's going to be much more wary, much more aware and concerned to shoot on me next time, versus if I just was like, I'm going to sprawl, she doesn't really feel too much from the sprawl. Like I'm obviously not like Olympic champion, like caliber at sprawling on people from the open. So like, if I'm like wrestling a Bo Nickel or a Kyle Schneider or like, one of these guys who are like, world level guys, especially like Kyle Schneider, or like a JD Cox, I'm wrestling one of these guys. Obviously, they're dealing with guys who have much better sprawls than I do, but they're not dealing with guys who have much better submissions. So once they hit my hips, I'll just be like, cool, we're going down. And then I can start to scrimmage, and I can use submissions against a super good wrestler, and I can use positional stuff against a super good jiu-jitsu guy. And so the general rule, you can kind of screw up jiu-jitsu guys with wrestling and screw up wrestlers with good jiu-jitsu. All right, so let's just talk some tactics. Again, general rules. Then I'm talking about when to go for submissions. In general, okay, because everything we're doing is scrimmage wrestling under ADCC rules. In general, if we are in the no points part of the match, so in the first 5 minutes for normal matches or the first 10 minutes for finals matches, and no points are being scored, I am generally more inclined, or if I'm up on points, let's say I'm fighting in the IBJJF and I'm up 4 points probably or more, where they have to not just take me down to score to even the score, but they have to take me down and pass my guard. So if I'm up a considerable amount of points, or there are no points in ADCC, or if I'm in a submission only match, okay, so anything that's not going to put me in a deficit of points if I end up in bottom and screwing up the scrimmage, I will generally be more inclined to go for submissions. So in the first 5 minutes, I'm going to play more of a submission-based game because there's a high reward. If I hit the submission, obviously I get the submission. And then if I'm in a tournament setting, I use a lot less energy. I'm a lot more fresh for my next match. Whereas if we are in the or if we're in the point section, where now if let's say they go for a blast double, I go for a guillotine, I miss the guillotine. Now I'm either using a pretty considerable amount of energy to stand up from a losing scrimmage where I'm in bottom position and I've lost the guillotine, or I get so committed to the guillotine that I put myself in such a compromising position that after she escapes the guillotine, I'm already in side control, and it's essentially impossible sometimes for me to scrimmage out because I got so deep into the guillotine that I didn't want to lose it, that I just lose the scrimmage before it really even starts. As soon as she escapes, the 3-second timer starts, and then I'm basically lost the scrimmage already. So in general, if there are no points, or if I'm not in jeopardy of them scoring points to the point where it will even the score or put them ahead, I generally am more inclined to go for submissions off of the takedowns. Whereas if there are points initiated, or if she does hit a takedown, it will even the score because I don't want to go to the ref. I don't want to leave my fate in the hands of the ref. If it will even the score, or even worse, if it'll put her up on the scoreboard, I generally play more of a conservative positional game rather than a submission game. Obviously, you can break these rules, but that's the general idea. Okay, so if I'm way up on points or there's no points, I generally play more of a submission-heavy game. And if there are points and they're relatively close, then I usually play more of a positional-heavy game. All right, so another thing that we can talk about is a big mistake I see that no one really talks about, which is it's pretty subtle when you're watching it, but if you're looking for it, it's pretty pronounced. People play a game a lot of times where they either, let's say I'm going for a move or my partner's going for a move, and they start a transition. Most people have in their mind, let's say they lock onto a guillotine, they have in their mind, I'm going for this guillotine. Okay, so they're either I'm going to sprawl or I'm going to do the guillotine, and there's no interface between the two, and there's no on the spot thinking of I can change between these two. It's going from locked or unlocked hands in a body lock or wherever else. I can go from locked hands, I can go long arm, short arm, I can unlock my hands, I can drag the leg down, I can relock my hands, I can go inside elbow, I can move my hands into positions and move fluidly through locked and unlocked hands when I'm passing half guard, or passing with a body lock or taking my partner down, whatever the case is. You can move between a positional game where I'm sprawling and a submission game. So I can start off with the submission, but the thing is that everyone will start off with the submission. They'll say, oh, I have the submission. And if I don't finish the submission, that's it, I'm losing the scrimmage. Don't get in that mindset. If I go for a guillotine, she puts me down. I go for a guillotine from here. Even if I feel the guillotine slipping, I'm not going to be able to finish her. There's no score yet. She has to escape the guillotine, and she has 3 seconds to score on me. So as long as she can't hold me down, if she escapes the guillotine and she frees her head, she holds me down 1, 2, and I'm up. Now there's no score. Now she has to put me back down, and then she can score. Okay, so don't get it in your head that if you start with a submission, you have to end with a submission. You can start with a submission, and you can use the threat of a submission to move into a more positional play. So even if I see so many times is a guy will go for a guillotine, they'll be here, and they'll feel they'll lose it, and they're oh man, I lost the guillotine, and they just let go. The head pops out, and they're you know what, I lost the guillotine, and it's kind of a quitter mentality where they just end up down here, and then okay, well now the clock starts, you just give her the score. if I'm not going to hit the guillotine, use the guillotine, use the fact that her head's on the floor, her forehead's on the floor, use this guillotine to go in, and I tell you I'm not going to get the guillotine, then transition into a positional play. And take her over, and now get top position. Or if she goes to get back up from here, and now in front headlock, and I'm just doing my normal positional game, I can go behind, I can go to guillotines, whatever the case is. Or I feel like I'm starting with the submission, I feel like the submission is not going to be there, I can use a fake Sumigashi from here, that as she goes to start getting up, we can go and we can heist, and we can go into our positional play. So just because you're starting with one doesn't mean that you have to continue with just that thing. And you can look at the flip side of that coin, where it's like, if I'm starting with a guillotine, I don't have to stay with the guillotine and just hang on to the guillotine and try to finish it for dear life. I can start with the guillotine. I can use the threat of the guillotine to go into positional plays. Just like I can give my partner a super heavy sprawl. So like if she goes to shoot a head outside double, for example, and I'm turning towards her and I'm giving her a strong sprawl, just because I'm sprawling in positions like this doesn't mean that if she postures up and starts to drive across, I'm like, oh man, I'm going to lose it, and I fall down and I take the score. I can start with a heavy positional play from here. If I hit a strong sprawl because she goes in, she goes to start shooting, I hit a strong sprawl from here, and now right from here, as she goes to start driving across in positions like this, we can switch into guillotines, and now we can use those guillotines where now I can use the thread of the guillotine to fall and go into submissions, or I can use a thread of guillotines where as she goes to start driving towards me, like I said, fall like in and going into all of our submissions and play initially with a strong positional game where I'm sprawling. I've lost the battle for a sprawl, and I just use the follow up and go into submissions. So just because you start with that position, a strong positional play like a sprawl, or just because you start with a submission like a guillotine or a kimura, doesn't mean that you have to stay with that play the whole way through. You can start with a strong positional play, but it's like classical wrestling, like a sprawl, and go into kimuras, go into guillotines, go into leg locks. You can start with guillotines, leg locks, kimuras, and then you can go into strong positional plays off of that. So don't get caught up in this tunnel vision where it's just like, I'm latching onto the guillotine and I have to do that, or I'm sprawling and I have to do that. Play between submission, position, submission, position. So let's look at the situation where I have most opportunities to go into these submissions. That's always going to be from chest to back positions. If you look at our previous instructionals, one of the things that I'm always preaching is that I don't like to go into shots down on my knees and end up in positions where I'm carrying body weight where their chest is on my back for long amounts of time. Okay, so number one, it's just tiring. Number two, that's where most of the submissions come from. So if I ever get to a position where I can either snap her down in situations like this, and I'm chest to back, or she goes to shoot on me and I start sprawling and I'm chest to back, or she picks up a single leg, she starts off with good posture and she's here, and I start breaking her posture and I get chest to back. Okay, now we can go in and we can start putting in our submissions from there. Okay, so anytime that I can get chest to back on her, I'm going to have an opportunity to go into most of my submissions. Okay, anytime that I'm chest to back on her, behind her, now I have many good opportunities as well. I can start going in and I can start transitioning into situations where I put her hands down on the floor and I can start putting hooks in. I can go in and I can start transitioning into situations where I start picking up my partner's leg and then I can start putting her hands down on the floor and throwing my leg up and over or falling back into attack with her legs. So anytime that we're chest to back or my chest is on her back, I have good opportunities to go into submissions. Now I have less so opportunities to go into submissions where her chest is on my back. I still do have some opportunities where from here I can go and I can start getting to my partner's legs and then scooting in as she goes to sprawl like normal wrestlers will. I can start pulling myself into submissions my partner's lower body. I can also start rolling into my partner's legs from here and going into all of our attacks on my partner's legs. Okay, but there are good things that I can do where her chest is on my back, but primarily whenever I have chest to back, my chest on her back is going to be situations where we can start going in and start attacking my partner. So everything now is starting to come together because all the previous instructionals, my whole thing I was always talking about is I don't like to do things like this. This is why everyone thinks I suck at wrestling, because of the fact that I don't do this. Because everyone looked at the wrestling like, oh, Gordon sucks because he never shoots. It's like, yeah, I do. They're just with different shots. They're with high shots. They're with knee taps. They're with foot sweeps. They're very high percentage, low energy, and low risk. What I try to avoid is things like this, where I shoot and I hit my knee like normal people do. That's where you start to run into issues. All right, most people are going to move people around. They're going to come in and they're going to start going in and shooting down on the knees, head outside, and they go to double legs like this. Okay, this is the time where guillotines start happening. This is the time where I start getting sprawled and start carrying body weight. She starts going behind me. She starts going for keyboards, all kinds of things from that. Okay, so now you're starting to see the opportunities for submissions are opening up. Whenever I get these chest to back positions, and I'm trying to avoid being put in submissions, I'm trying to avoid these chest to back positions because of these reasons. So now everything is kind of making sense as to why I don't just shoot and put myself underneath my partner and have her putting all of her body weight on me and then opening up all these attacks on these submissions. All right, so we are going to look at a three-directional guard where it is ground to standing interface, but now we're looking at standing to ground interface. So this is going to be a transition where you're going to have to start standing and think about classical wrestling techniques. And the second you hit the ground, you're going to have to make a transition into not only classical jiu-jitsu moves, but also if you're trying to get top position, where you're like halfway through a sweep with like a sumigashi off of a failed guillotine, for example, you can like sweep the guy and then make a choice. Am I going to stay with the guillotine, fall back to bottom? Am I going to stay with the guillotine, come on into top position? Or are they going to clear the head and start trying to scrimmage? Then I'm going to have to chase them from turtle position or whatever the case is. So there's going to be a lot of things going on, and the speed of decision making and just building habits over time, doing all the reps, is going to make a huge difference from here. So we're going to have the interface of we're doing all of our wrestling moves, we're playing our wrestling game, and then from here we start snapping into positions where we can start going into our classical jiu-jitsu moves. Or from here, I either make a choice: am I snapping her down and then going into my jiu-jitsu moves, or do I have like a strong high risk set where now I just start sitting down in situations like this, and now once I sit, we're just doing classical jiu-jitsu. But in the event, let's say I lose her from here, I know the clock starts now. So if I try to go into classical jiu-jitsu, I feel like the move is not working, then I have to go back into, okay, I'm still in the middle of a scrimmage, I have to start putting her over, and now do I make a choice to go back to jiu-jitsu, or do I start coming up from situations like this, trying to get to top position? I get here, maybe she turns away, and now maybe I'm back into positional scrimmage where I have to go in and start storing from there. So you have to realize you're still in a scrimmage, and you have to go back and forth between standing, going into the ground, standing techniques with classical wrestling, going into ground submissions, and possibly back up to standing, possibly back to ground, possibly back to neutral, possibly on offense, possibly on defense. So there's a lot of things happening, a lot of things that could potentially happen. You have to be reading the situation to get to a winning scrimmage where you're either on top, on the back with two hooks or body triangle, or getting to a submission and obviously getting the tap. So we've talked about the general theory of like how to use jiu-jitsu against wrestling against jiu-jitsu guys. When to use submissions in general. Generally, what I will do is I always will try to play a game. I'm just trying to like conceptualize this. I'm always trying to play a game where I'm always building from the hands to the head, playing a slow roll game and not revealing my attacks all at once. So as the match goes on and I get higher and higher levels of defense and I'm trying to get my partner to reveal his hand in a faster progression than I'm revealing my hand. And so I won't like spam, and I especially don't like to spam submissions early on in the match. Like if you look at my earlier matches in my career, from like black belt until current, I went for way more submissions throughout matches when I was younger, earlier in my career. But I missed a lot more submissions than I hit. As I started to progress, I went for a lot less submissions. My submission output was much lower, but the rate of submissions that I completed was a lot higher because my opponents were tired, were already exhausted by the time I started to go for submissions. So what I don't really like to do is to spam offensive submissions and try to force myself into submissions early on in the match. Now, that being said, if you're competing under ADCC, early on in the match is really the only time when you can go for submissions because of the fact, according to like the theory we talked about before, is really like one of the times you're really going to be going for submissions because of the fact that there are no points, there are no repercussions for like going for a guillotine and ending up in bottom position. Now, with that being said, what I will try to do is I will try to use submissions relatively reactively rather than proactively. So if at any point early on in the match a guy picks up my legs, I will try to use submissions reactively just to keep him honest. So like a perfect example is my match with Hulk in ADCC, where he shoots a few times and I threaten guillotines. I started trying to snap his head down. I get him into like strong front headlocks. So he's like ripping his head out and trying to move away. That makes him timid throughout the match, timid to shoot, and it allows me to open up more with my offense. If a guy shoots on you, let's say we're super early in the match, right? And a guy shoots, and this also happened. Like another perfect example of this is Luke Rockhold versus Chris Weidman, where Chris put him down. He threatened a couple strong guillotines, and then Chris was a lot more timid to shoot because he was like, man, that was a serious guillotine. If someone shoots on me and she goes to shoot and I sprawl and I end up in a relatively tight guillotine, let's say I go for a high elbow, whatever the case is, this is pretty common from here. I go for a high elbow and she backs away. She almost and she gets 70% of the way to finish, and she finally pulls her head out and she's like that was a serious guillotine. She's going to be a lot more calculated and fearful of shooting on my legs now because she knows that at any point she could get finished. Especially when things start to get slippery. The slipperiness actually helps strangles. So if I can slide my hand in much easier next time, if she's much more tired next time, so you can start to keep people honest. So now she's being more timid to shoot, which means that I can start opening up my hand fighting more without having to worry about like having perfect down blocking hands. I can start playing a little bit more loose with my hands, knowing that if she does shoot, I have a strong guillotine, and she knows I have a strong guillotine. So in general, what I'll do is I'll try to play my long form game, and instead of trying to force submissions where I jump for a Kane-Masami or I try to go for a guillotine and I end up in bottom position, and now I'm using all this energy to get back up to my feet into a neutral position where I'm carrying her body weight over and over and over again. If I lose the submissions, it's a losing game because of the fact that your work rate is going to be high, because of the fact that you're trying for these submissions on a fresh opponent and you end up in bottom position and you have to use all this energy to get back up. So in general, what I'll do is I'll play a long form game, and every time she goes to shoot on me, like she picks up a single leg from here and she has good posture, I'll just threaten. Okay, I know that the second I come off this hand from here, I know that she should be switching into a bars guard with a head inside double. Now I know this, and if she puts me down, if there's no points, no problem. Okay, but she's going to be kept honest the whole time, knowing that at any point I can start snapping his head, and if I get it buried, she's going to go into a strong guillotine from here. So in general, just adding on to the theory we talked about before, I will use a lot earlier in the matches. I will use a lot more reactive submissions than proactive submissions. So I will use them just to keep my partner honest. And this happened as well, like Vinicius in ADCC. He was here, he picked up a single leg, and I was just heavy on this head. And I kept threatening. We'd go in here, I'd threaten to move his head down, threaten to stab his head down. And then from here, he was like, you know what, I don't even want the single because I'm carrying body weight. I feel like guillotine coming on, he just let me go. Just after he let me go, I was right back on his head and just walked him down. And so using these reactive submissions to keep people honest and still fear in them early on in the match, like, hey, if I screw any of these things up, if I leave my arm behind, I'm going to get finished in a Kimura. I'm going to have my back taken off the Kimura. I'm going to get guillotined. I'm going to get reversed. And so you can use these reactive threats of submission off of your partner's offense to kind of have them shell up, and then that kind of opens up your offense and allows you to turn the tide in the match so you can later, either put a pace in them or submit them later. So just adding to some theory, that's just some more general theory of how I approach these scrimmage type situations in an ADCC rule set. All right, so obviously everything we've talked about up until this point are just general.
Are you sure of this?
What?
It's 4:30 a.m.
It's two
I
people.
don't know if you guys can tell because my eyes are like half open.
That's ET, dog.
There's two people riding a bike with a blanket on top of it. It has to be Austin. It has to
That
be.
does look like ET.
That is correct. Halloween. It's Halloween, literally. What was that?
It's cold out there, bro.
You ride a bike with a blanket on it. That's
Hey.
new.
Um,
I'm sorry. It was,
and this is smarter than running.
okay, you know what? Can you run?
So
Oh, yeah.
you want to see me sprint? You know. You know. I can sprint.
Boy, spare.
I can sprint.
All right.
All right. Anyways, I don't know what I was talking about. Oh, breaking the rules. Yeah. So these are like just general rules. Like in the match with Hulk, for example, you saw me go for a Kimura like later in the match, and I failed. But the Kimura was so deep, and he let me put it in so deep that I was like relatively confident I was going to get it. And I didn't, and I was like, okay, well, I can just scrimmage out of here. And the reason I did that was because I was like, there's no way that he's going to be able to capitalize on the scrimmage thereafter, even if I go for the Kimura and end up underneath him. So you can follow the general rules, but you can break the rules. Same thing with like when I fought Patrick Gaudio in Worlds. I felt what he was like. I swept him pretty easy with cross Hashigurami, and it was 2-0, so I was winning. So actually, what I should have done, is when he came up on the single leg, I should have sprawled out of the single leg and then went right back into a guard pull and then just swept him again and racked up more points like that. But I was like, it's a long tournament. I have a lot of matches moving forward. Also, I'm pretty sure. That was a match. Also, where I was so hungry going into that because it was like an all-day thing at Worlds, and she convinced me to have like this much cashews, and I was so nauseous. That was the match I was most nauseous for in my entire career. I was like this close, like even like worse than Felipe. I was so I had to like lay. The second I came off the mat, I just crashed on the floor, laid down, and like had to go to sleep where I was for like a full 20 minutes, and then get up and fight Jackson Souza, and that was the last match of the day. And I was like, okay, I'm like good now. But those cashews killed me.
Cashews are crazy mid snack.
They
Cashews?
Cashews, yeah. She's like, you need some salt. I'm hungry. She's like, just have like a couple I had like 3. And I was like, worst mistake ever.
Yeah, like any normal human being would be perfectly fine, but not this guy.
So anyways, I was like, because of that, I was like, number one, if I end up back in bottom position if he goes for Barzagor and I end up back in bottom position, it'll be 2-2, so we won't be up on points. I'm pretty sure I could sweep him pretty easy again with cross Hashi because he just let me do it, in the first 30 seconds. In addition, I was like, if I submit him, the match will be over, and I can like deal with my nausea, on the side of the mat, and I like potentially won't throw up in the middle of the match or like, lose because I'm nauseous. So like in every scenario, you're going to weigh these options and be like, okay, well, what is the worst case scenario from here? If the worst case scenario isn't that bad and you're confident that you could turn it around or like get more points right away, or get back up right away, you can obviously break the rules. So just because I'm like telling you guys, like, hey, don't go for proactive submissions early in the match from the scrimmaging positions. Don't really go for submissions like too much, like favor positional plays later in the matches when points are initiated rather than positional submission plays. These are like general rules, but obviously you can break the rules, and it's like situation to situation. So don't get caught up. It's like starting with a submission and then saying I'm gonna finish with the submission, or I'm gonna sprawl. Don't get tunnel vision caught up with like what I'm saying as like this is the law. everything has to be spontaneous, and it's very situational. So these are like just general rules of thumb, but you can obviously break the rules as you go. All right, so let's talk about losing a submission. So let's say that we get to a submission, and we feel like we're not going to be able to finish that submission. Many times, even at the high levels, when guys lose the submission and they know the clock is running, they're so mentally defeated from losing a submission, they'll just accept bottom position and they'll take the 2. Understand that once you realize, the second your brain calculates, I'm not going to finish this submission, you have to be thinking, what is next? So that is either going to be, if I can't finish the submission, what other submission am I going to make a transition into? Okay, so if I try to go for a guillotine and the guillotine fails, how can I transition right from a guillotine into a triangle so that the clock doesn't start? Okay, so how can I keep the submission clock running so there's no timer started and I can stay attacking this guy? He's on defense, I'm on offense, and there's no clock started for potential score on me. So if I'm going to lose the submission, it's not going to happen. What other submissions am I going to? Hey, if I feel like I can't transition to other submissions, what is my next play as far as position? Okay, can I get to top position? Can I maintain top position or get to top position? Can I sweep him from bottom position so that I'm in top position and I get the score? So if I go for a guillotine, I feel like it's not there. We land. I try for a second or two. It's not there. How can I go for a sumigashi, end up in top, and get my score? Okay, so what other submissions can I go to? How can I play? How can I make a positional play out of this, whether it's getting top position, back position, whatever the case is? If I can't get a submission, if I can't get the top position, then the last thing I'm doing is not accepting bottom position. It's how can I get back to my feet and get back to a neutral position where I have some kind of asymmetrical hand position and have hands on my partner. Okay, so if I can't transition to another submission, if I can't transition into a good position, whether it be, so I'm either trying to submit my partner, there's 3 ways to score. I can submit my partner, I can take my partner's back, or I can get the top position. Those are the 3 ways to score under ADCC rules. Okay? If I feel like I can't submit my partner or transition to a different submission, how can I get the top position or take their back? The 3 ways to score. If I can't score, then I have to be thinking I'm losing this submission. Once the submission's off, once they're out, clock is starting. So now I have to get back up into standing position. Not just how I can get back up into standing position, how I can get back up into a standing position and immediately make contact so I have contact with them, preferably on their head, and they have no ability to make contact with my head. So we have asymmetrical hand positions, and I'm right back into some kind of offense. So once you lose the submission, you have to make a decision on what you're trying to accomplish. You're either going to a different submission, you're playing a positional game, or you're trying to get back up into a relatively neutral position where you have some kind of advantage where you can start going into offense and staying in an offensive cycle. So don't be a guy who loses the submission and is cranking on a guillotine and they lose it and they're just and they just take the score. No, you should be pissed that this guy thinks that this guy has the audacity to think that he's competitive with you and it's actually trying to fight out of the move. And you're fuck, this is annoying me. I'm losing the submission. What's next? And the second you realize the submission's not going to hit, you're already thinking, what's next? Where are we going? And how can I score off this? All right. Most importantly, Sonny, change your socks. So just take note of that.
Yeah.
For the future. Every day. Or just randomly, you should just change your socks and see if people pick up on it.
Tomorrow got me pink.
The last instructional was reverse underhook. There was just one random picture where she just had a completely different outfit on. I was like, how did that happen? on the cover photo.
I saw it.
So it's what?
I saw it. It has to be black.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just one picture is completely different outfit, a different day.
Yeah, it's like 4 pictures of her with a sushi roll outfit on, and then it's there's one just completely different one.
Yeah.
It's
why? With normal t-shirt on it. Yeah, it's British fanatics, and that's the product you buy, guys. It's your choice. Go on.
So going through this overview of what we're going to look at, we're going to go into all the submission entrances when we are on offense. So we're doing proactive submissions where we're attacking our partner. So the first thing we're going to look at is situations where we're coming out and we're hitting snap downs on our partner, and we're snapping our partner down, whether it be a straight snap and moving into a front headlock, or a cross snap moving into a front headlock. Now, we've looked at, like, obviously the hand fighting, the setups, and all those things. So we're going to primarily focus on submissions here, obviously. The first thing is we're going to look at just snap downs, moving into front headlocks, and looking at the hierarchy of guillotines, anacondas, darces, why I do one, why I don't do another, things like that. Then we're going to look at head outside singles and doubles. So, I go to shoot a double from here, I go to run across, and then how I can start to go into submissions from either head outside doubles or head outside singles. Okay, we're going to start off with a single, just because it's usually easier to make a transition into a single and a double. But they're relatively similar. Like, you have pretty much the same submissions as you do from a single and a double, but because of the fact that I have two legs, obviously there's a little bit more timing involved. You can hang on to a single a lot longer than you can hang on to a double. You can put someone down a lot easier with a double than you can with a single. So there's slight differences, but relative to the same thing. Then we're going to look at head inside singles, like so, where I can go and I can start hitting submissions from here. Okay, where I go in, depending on where my partner's legs are, we can go into submissions from situations like this. And then also head inside doubles, where I can threaten doubles, and then when I get my partner sprawling on me, we can pull back and go into submissions off that. Then we're going to look at offense from rear body lock positions, whether it be looking to go in and score and start putting our partner's hands down on the floor, or we can go in and we can start making transitions into things. So yeah, where we fall into situations where we can come through and go right into attacks on our partner's legs. So we can go from rear body lock situations. Let's say we have short time, whatever the case is submission only. We can come through and start falling into situations where we can either invert or put our partner down and go into attacks on our partner's legs in various ways. Then we're going to go into defense for all of these positions. So let's say that she snaps me down over here, how we can start using the snap down or the thread the snap down to start pulling ourselves into attacks on my partner's legs. She goes in for a head outside double. Now she goes in for a head outside double, I can go into attacks on my partner from here. She goes into a head outside double, outside single. She goes into a head inside single, head inside double. How we can start going in and attacking our partner's upper body or lower body from positions like that. She has a rear body lock on me. How we can go in and start threatening, attacking our partner's legs from positions like this. So we're going to go through these positions where we're in offense and we're proactively looking to attack our partner, or she's in offense and we're reactively looking to attack our partner, and breaking them down between proactive and reactive submissions. And then we're going to go into some flying submissions where I will probably make her do most of them and teach her how to do flying arm bars. And then we'll do flying arm bars, flying triangles, stuff like that. With some of my favorite things, like we put a hand on the floor from here and we just start going in and start throwing ourselves into all kinds of submissions with like flying or like pseudo flying moves where I have like a hand on the ground, and then we can go into attacks like that. We go into offense, proactive, defense, reactive, and then some like bonus flying attacks, which will be fun. So we'll get started.